welcome to Policing TV. I'm delighted to be joined by re-elected Thames Valley PCC Matthew Barber. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here on Policing TV, and congratulations. Um, your re-election, the result was announced just in the handful of days just gone. What are your observations about that hard-fought election campaign?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Bernard. You're quite right. It was certainly a very close margin in Thames Valley, a big shift from where I was for the first term, and got to be honest and acknowledge that. I think the reality for me is we saw an awful lot of tactical voting, which I think was really about national issues rather than around policing on the ground. And there's a great irony of this because as a party candidate for PCC, people often say to me, they want the role to be apolitical, and I think actually that's broadly speaking, I would say how I have run it. I'm not a tribal politician who's tub thumping all the time. What I think most politicians want is what's best for their community. But of course, there's then a bit of an irony that it does often come down to the national mood when it gets to polling day, and certainly some of my opposition candidates were encouraging people to just stop the Tories because you don't like what the Prime Minister's up to at the moment. And I'm just very pleased from my perspective that I think the message about policing locally is what seemed to have cut through talking to residents on the doorstep.
So what sorts of things were those people on the doorstep saying, and did they differ in any way from your first PCC campaign, where you had been the deputy PCC and you were standing for election as PCC the first time?
So I think things have shifted a little bit. Perhaps as an incumbent, I found that a more gradual shift because I think, as with all PCCs, I spend probably a fair chunk of my time outside of an election campaign, still knocking on doors or going out, meeting people, talking to communities. Anyway, that's part of the role, is to be the voice of communities. So it's certainly a bit more intense at an election campaign, but it's not sort of a big switch over. I think what we'd seen certainly in Thames Valley, we've gone over and above almost any other part of the country. I think I haven't seen the latest stats, but certainly up till about 6 months ago, we've gone over and above anybody else in recruiting beyond the 20,000 uplift target. So we are significantly larger than we were back in 2010. And when you look around the country, there are still some forces who are smaller than they were before those changes during the austerity years. So whilst the message from the public is still, we want to see more police, we want them to be more visible, I think there is an acknowledgement from a lot of members of the public that I spoke to that they are starting to see that shift happening because we have been delivering those numbers in Thames Valley. But of course, that visibility challenge is something that will always be there in policing. We will probably never satisfy that demand. We also need to balance it against the unseen demands that the police have in dealing with very real crimes, often happen behind closed doors.
Before we move on to the future, what you're going to do next, what you're hoping for the force next, there is a bit of a challenge in terms of visibility and understanding of what a police and crime commissioner, or in some places a police fire and crime commissioner, actually does. Did you, and you, I should say, you have got an enormous geographic area in Thames Valley to cover in terms of campaigning and in terms of engaging with whilst you're serving as the PCC. What are your thoughts on that? The almost this is a bit of an exaggeration, but the invisibility of PCCs and a lack of understanding on the part of the general public.
So I think you're right, and I think the mixed landscape probably doesn't help. As you said yourself, there are some police, fire and crime commissioners, there are a majority of police and crime commissioners, and there are other places where the mayor fulfills the role of police and crime commissioner. So there isn't even a simple national definition that makes it really clear about who's responsible for policing in your area. But equally, I think whilst that's disappointing, I think it's definitely a job of work for myself as an incumbent PCC and certainly the media and others to explain the role, because I think I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think it is a role that can make a real positive difference for communities and for policing. But I think when I talk to the one or two people, literally no more than that, I don't think, who during the campaign brought up police authorities, Yeah, how many people? Part of the problem with the old police authority model, how many people understood what a police authority was and how it worked, and certainly how many people knew who their local representative on the police authority was. So policing governance has never been particularly visible, to be perfectly honest. And much as I think we have a fantastic chief constable in Thames Valley, in Jason Hogg, if you talk to a lot of members of the public, they might get a better idea of what a chief constable is. But I think many would struggle to name who their chief constable was. So yes, I think we should be higher profile. I think there's a job of work for me to do in Thames Valley, as with others, about raising the profile of the role. But I think we also need to be realistic about what the context of that is historically.
So a job of work for you to do in raising the profile of PCCs, but there's a job of work to do beyond that as well. So what things have you got on your to-do list for the next 4 years, the 4 years of your tenure, of your effectively how long this election puts you in post for before there's a further election?
Yeah, so I'm hoping for a full 4 years, and there is a big to do list. I actually was the only candidate at the election locally in Thames Valley who had a plan. Again, possibly a bit of an advantage having been the incumbent, but I think I was one of the first PCCs last time round to get my police and crime plan adopted. And what I've done again this time is to be really clear about what my intentions are, to effectively put that to the public at the election, and then I can hit the ground running, saying, look, not only have I got a mandate, but the plan that I've got has got a mandate. So definitely a continued focus on a lot of things that we've already been doing. This isn't a massive change of shift. It's a case of saying, well, I've had 3 years and there is more to do. So one of those areas, for example, very topical at the moment, is about what we do on retail crime. And I spent a lot of time last year actually discussing, not just with the police, but with retailers, some local independent stores, but also with the loss and risk managers at some of the big brands around the country, about how are we going to do this? All very well saying we must do something to solve this problem, but we also need to think about, well, what are the practical steps that we can all take in our different spheres to reduce retail crime and restore confidence from retailers and the public in policing. So back in January, I launched that plan, and of course that's only a few months ago. So we are starting to see some improvements coming through, but I want to be able to embed that, and there is an awful lot of detail that we still need to put in place as a result of that. Similarly, around neighbourhood crime more broadly, over the last 12 months or so, we doubled the number of officers in neighbourhood policing roles in Thames Valley. That was part of the commitment that the chief came in to deliver. But of course, doubling a relatively small number is just a bigger number that is still smaller than I would like it to be. And we need to make sure that we do these changes in a sensible, staged fashion. The public will want to see officers on the streets all the time being visible. And I don't think I would disagree with that. But of course, we can't just the nature of policing is you can't just switch that sort of thing over. You need to have that gradual shift of putting the resources in the right place to allow policing to become much more preventative. I think there is a reality that often police are responding to issues rather than preventing crime. If you look back into the old Pelian principles, that prevention should be where we are focused. Of course, we don't live in an ideal world. We won't prevent everything, but actually that gradual shift of resources to say, well, if we can be more preventative, we will need less resource in the responsive areas of policing. But that will take time and has to be a gradual shift.
So you, Matthew, are an elected Conservative PCC. I regularly hear from police and crime commissioners that they, once elected, look to act in the interests of all members of the public within the region that they are responsible for. But there has been quite a significant change in the political makeup of police and crime commissioners and mayors with responsibility for policing. Very broadly, um, prior to the election last Thursday, there were relatively few Labour PCCs and many Conservative PCCs, and one Plaid Cymru PCC in Wales. There's still one Plaid Cymru PCC in Wales, but many more Labour PCCs and fewer Conservative PCCs. There's a general election, almost, I think, certainly taking place in the next year. Um, whilst I will preempt your point about PCCs once elected shouldn't be that political. But what's your take on the politics of policing right now?
Um, I think there'll be some challenging times for policing coming up, whatever the outcome of the general election. To be as apolitical as I can on that. I think we all know there's some difficult financial challenges coming down the road for any government, and there are some challenges with the Home Office that relate to that wider aspect. And actually, I don't think, genuinely, I don't think the Conservatives have got all the answers at the moment, and I certainly don't feel that Labour have got easy solutions to this. The rhetoric around additional community police officers, we know there's some challenges around the numbers that Labour have been putting out around that. But we know both parties are expecting policing to make some significant savings from within existing budgets, and that is a challenge given the amount that's been saved over the last 10 or 15 years already. There is, the general view would be there is not a lot of meat left on the bone to cut back on. So there will be some challenges, I think, regardless of that. But I will focus on the issues that matter. And some of these things aren't about the money, and they're issues where I think we can work cross-party on. So it was only a couple of months ago I met with Keir Starmer and the Shadow Home Secretary when they visited Milton Keynes to talk about what we're doing about knife crime. You'll have seen a couple of weeks ago national headlines of knife crime on the increase. Knife crime has been falling by just over 10% in Thames Valley over the last 12 months. Now, I don't claim that we're all wonderful and have the answer to all of the world's problems. Of course, that's not the case. But I think on that particular area, it's something I focus on, the force is focused on. We need to learn from the best at these things. I think that's an area where we are doing very well on. There will be other areas around the country where we need to learn from other forces. But I'm keen that we, if you like, sell that story to a Labour government as much as a Conservative government, because I want to make sure that we can spread the good work that we're doing.
The Association of Police and Crime Commissioners is where PCCs and indeed mayors with policing responsibility come together on a national basis. Plenty of national issues, challenges for policing, that it is now far less blue, if I can put it that way, far less conservative, far more substantially red. There's almost a balance of red and blue. You don't expect there to be stalemate in those APCC meetings. There's
And
still going to be opportunity to come to reasoned national ways forward on those key national policing matters.
I think so. And actually, the nature of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, as you know, is that it all sort of has to be collegiate. It is not a body that combined its members. If there is one thing I think that defines police and crime commissioners of all parties, we're all fiercely independent in our own thinking and our own views. Now that may create problems for some at times, but there is again great strength in that and be able to stand up genuinely independently for your communities. And so I don't think the APCC has never been able to say we've got a majority now. The direction that PCCs collectively support is X, because you will always have one or two outliers who say no, not in my name. So it's never been by its nature a body to have a collective view. But what it does do is allow some of that really clear dialogue, that where there is agreement, that things can be pushed forward collectively, and where there's disagreement, it becomes a forum to discuss that both amongst PCCs, but also as a really useful conduit into the Home Office and other parts of government.
Matthew, it's been fascinating talking with you on your re-election as Thames Valley PCC. Thank you so much for your time. So much more that we could explore, and I do hope and look forward to Policing Insight and Policing TV covering that with you, your OPC, Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, and with the Force Thames Valley Police itself. But Matthew Barber, Thames Valley PCC, for the time being, at least, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.